Right, let's begin, shall we, with Graham Potter, because, of course, since we spoke last, Thomas Tuchel has lost his job at Chelsea. We'll come on to talk about him a little bit later. Graham Potter was very swiftly anointed the new Chelsea manager, Liam, almost as though there had been plans before Tuchel had lost his job.
Almost. Yeah. We weren't aware of them, obviously, before news of Tuchel's sacking broke, but in the course of making calls and putting together our big long read on Tuchel's sacking, it became quite clear to us that the wheels had been in motion with Potter for a few weeks, and that when Chelsea were looking at Marc Cucurella from Brighton, and Todd Boehly flew to Mykonos to put the finishing touches to that deal, he displayed a startling degree of knowledge of all things Graham Potter, his entire career from Östersunds onwards. And
to be fair to Todd Boehly, maybe he just has an encyclopedic knowledge of all football.
Maybe it's possible.
Apart from formations, right?
Well,
not the best at
some people we've spoken to would contest the encyclopedic knowledge of football view of Todd Boehly, but I think it's true that the owners have certainly gained a lot of football knowledge this summer. I think it's been a steep learning curve for them at times, and they haven't been viewed favourably by everyone. But no, they latched on to Potter early as someone that could be a good fit for what they're building at Chelsea. And it got to the stage where when they decided that they wanted Tuchel out, Potter wasn't just a candidate, he was the clear first choice. And then Maurizio Pochettino was mentioned, and they did contact him as the sort of highest profile free agent out there, maybe with Zinedine Zidane as well. But Potter ticked most of the boxes for what they wanted, and that in itself I think is quite interesting, because there's been this desire in some quarters to paint Chelsea's new owners as like the typical splashy new owner coming in, spending $250 million on players in their first window, but normally those types of owners go for a name, don't they? They go for someone who's got a long history of trophies. They go for Jose Mourinho, let's face it.
Well, it sounded like they tried to go for Cristiano Ronaldo as a player, so you would think, therefore, that they would do the same for coach. Yeah,
and that's true. There was certainly, at the very least, a high degree of intrigue over the possibility of signing Ronaldo, and that was a point of tension with Tuchel. And you can talk about how compatible that is with going after Potter, but the fact that they thought Potter was the one for them, I think, is quite interesting and suggests they're at least sincere in their desire to try and build something long term. Whether they're actually going the right way about it is another question.
So I think there's probably, it's fair to say, a split of opinion amongst Chelsea supporters about Tuchel's sacking. We can chat about that in a little bit. But what's the reception to Potter been like so far? Because presumably, out of a complicated situation, you would have thought most supporters are fairly happy about that.
I think Chelsea fans have had a lot of practice at this, with head coaches changing often when they don't want them to. So while there's a lot of sadness and a lot of disappointment from a number of fans about Tuchel going, particularly in such brutal fashion, I think the desire at the very least is to get behind Potter and to show him support early, because they recognise that this could take a little bit of time. And with the amount of new players they've signed and the fact that this squad is clearly changing significantly, this could end up becoming a sort of transition season.
Yeah.
The owners want it to be a transition season which ends in a top four finish, but it could well be a bit more of a transition season. So the fans, I think, are broadly on side. There are obviously questions about the fact that Potter hasn't operated at this level before, and you're succeeding a Champions League winning coach. But I think the atmosphere inside the stadium will be positive against Salzburg.
Feels like a bit of a tidal change for Chelsea, doesn't it, John? Obviously, new owners have come in, and as Liam said a moment ago, there were a certain set of expectations about what would follow. But the Chelsea that I know are a club that often go for big players, go for big-name managers, try to make a statement, in many cases prior to Tuchel, try to allow the players to sort of find or figure out the solutions to on-pitch problems themselves. Chelsea signing Graham Potter is not really something I'd ever considered before. It feels like similar to what PSG are claiming to be doing at the moment and have done over the summer by signing a lower profile manager and talking more about team play than individuals.
Yeah, I agree, but actually I do think that people downplay the similarities between Tuchel and Potter insofar as I think they're both very similar in terms of the way they approach football. And I did a video last week looking at Graham Potter and what he brings, and a lot of what he does is, I like to call it problem solving. So each phase of play, he's going to say, right, we've got to move the ball from deep possession through the thirds, get it to the final third, and then generate chances. And I think he views each of those phases as a problem to be solved, and has the ability to be flexible, to change things around even within games, to be able to achieve that kind of thing. And I think Thomas Tuchel is very similar in that respect. I think he's a really elite coach when it comes to moving the ball through the thirds, and both Brighton under Potter and Chelsea under Tuchel have had issues maybe generating the most dangerous chances they can in the final third, which is a different question to be asked. But in many respects, I think the ability to be flexible is quite unique for someone like Thomas Tuchel. But being an elite manager at that level, I don't think many managers would want to be as reactive almost as he may be. I think Potter is more reactive, and that's probably because he's at a club where you have to be reactive, because you are going to be a lot of the time playing against teams that are better than you. But the idea of being a flexible manager at an elite side is I guess a little bit counterintuitive, because I think a lot of people expect big managers to just come out and say, we have this squad at our disposal, we have to be proactive, we have to go out there, we have to make the most of this of the squad that we have. Whereas obviously Thomas Tuchel came in and was just very defensive from the start. And I think at the beginning of Tuchel's career, everyone was saying, he's sorting out the defence and then he'll sort out the attack. And I guess you could question whether or not the attack ever got sorted out. But I think that's quite different to the way that a lot of other managers would do it. Maybe we're seeing that a little bit with Erik ten Hag, but I think that he's in a weird situation where he has to sort of work with a squad that isn't as good. Whereas I think Potter goes into the Chelsea job with a squad which is just so deep compared to what he's had before, and so I think he'll just be able to come in, play the same sort of system. I think he'll stick with a back three system. He plays this sort of 3-4-3 with a box in midfield that Tuchel has played, and so I don't think it's going to be a particularly steep learning curve for him. I think that he'll just come in and they'll do what they've done before.
I mean, the changes, though, are what you've highlighted already, that with Brighton, obviously, as a result of the quality of players he does need to be reactive and build his game plan around what sometimes better opposition are going to do. At Chelsea, he doesn't need to do that. But you would have thought, aside from the tactics, that's quite a significant change for a manager. I don't know about Östersund's one of the best teams in the league. Does he have experience of managing the team who are supposed to dominate?
I mean,
the
they
ball?
certainly were by the end. He took them over in the fourth tier and took them all the way up to the top. And obviously they had that famous victory against Arsenal in I guess it was the Europa League back then.
But they were underdogs, right?
In that game,
but their identity, if they
sure, I don't disagree with you on that. What I would disagree with you maybe is that Tuchel's. I think I
haven't said anything. You can't disagree with me. Just to be clear,
my base level is that you're wrong.
I won't have you disagree.
We'll start from that base level. Okay. So you're wrong, and I think with Tuchel, he the best things that he did at Chelsea in a tactical sense were always reactive, stopping opponents from doing things. So he absolutely had the number of Antonio Conte on most of the games they played. He switched up the system, played a 4-2-2-2 where it was all about stopping Conte's team being able to do the build-ups that we know that they can do. They try and lure people in. They do this really nice passing through the first third, and then you get the ball into your front three, and they're just elite at that. And Thomas Tuchel knew exactly how to stop that. And
a cup manager.
Yeah, you could call him that, where he's going to respond to opponents, and he's going to cause them problems. And I think in the last edition of the Champions League, they obviously had that terrible game against Real Madrid, but then in the second leg of that fixture, actually were very unlucky not to actually see the result through as well. So yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities between Potter and Tuchel, and I think that the reason why people think that Tuchel is an elite manager is because he's managed elite clubs. That's the only difference between him and Potter necessarily.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Daniel Taylor, Ollie Kay, Amy Lawrence and Rafa Honigstein. There are journalists dedicated to each Premier League team, so every fan gets the coverage they deserve, not just the big clubs. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.